Last year I did a 10 of the best on source ports and engine recreations. Problem is, there's more than 10, which is a nice problem to have, admittedly. I could probably do a 10-part series, never mind a video of 10. So by request, here's part 2. I should have included Open Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, but I'm afraid if I play that, I'll lose myself entirely and never play another game again. A phenomenon that also happens to the top spot on this video. Number 10. Beestone. A lesser known fact among retro FPS fans is that Wolfenstein 3D isn't even the best game in the Wolfenstein engine. Blake Stone holds that distinction, but because EC Wolf doesn't officially support it, someone else had to handle the source port. Step forth Boris I. Bendovsky, who was clearly annoyed at this and single-handedly brought Blake into the 21st century with Beestone. Now more people than ever before can appreciate the full majesty of Secret Agent Blake Stone as he tracks down the insidious Dr. Goldfire. Okay, so it's still not as good as Doom, but one of the people behind Blake became a senior programmer at id Software and was responsible for the new Doom, so it all worked out in the end. What do you mean I should have mentioned one of the Quake ports here? Number 9. Aleph Wang. A lesser known fact among retro FPS fans is... wait a minute, didn't I just... Halo wasn't the first shooter Bungie made. They started in 1993 with Pathways into Darkness, before cutting their FPS teeth on a series of shooters called Marathon. Most PC gamers won't have heard of these titles because they were predominantly Macintosh games, meaning that if you didn't have a Macintosh, you probably wouldn't have played a Bungie shooter on PC until as late as 2003. In 2005, they graciously released the entire trilogy as freeware, and Aleph Wang remedies the compatibility problem. The Marathon open source code project took advantage of the release and added OpenGL support, widescreen resolutions, interpolated frame rates, and the multi-platform releases that the series deserved, including support for Pathways into Darkness. Now all the early Bungie shooters can be played on the comfort of whatever system you happen to be using, completely free of charge. Okay, so it's not Halo, but it's interesting to see where the developer came from. Number 8. Augustus. At some point in time, Impressions games were comparable to Blizzard Entertainment. It went south for them shortly after the turn of the millennium, but not before they got to release a fantastic series of games. Among these were City Builders, Caesar 3, and Zeus, and Pharaoh. They're isometric with a historical or mythological theme, and I've spent more time listening to their sound effects than I'd care to admit, as someone else played them next to me for hundreds of hours. Julius is a source port that provides a re-implementation of Caesar 3 with widescreen support and nice graphical goodness, but it largely stays true to the original game. Augustus is a fork of Julius that takes it further by implementing things from later Impression City Builders, like roadblocks and zooming, as well as additional buildings that weren't in the original. City Builders in the style of Impressions are hard to come by these days, with a clutch of spiritual successors, but nothing surpassing the originals. So being able to play this one with new bells and whistles is something special. Number 7. Open Gothic. In the early 2000s, there were two schools of thought on what the best 3D open-world RPG was. The Western world was convinced that the latest Elder Scrolls title, Morrowind, was something quite unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Continental Europe laughed at this and produced a boxed copy of Gothic, which did everything Morrowind did, but a year earlier. Sadly, the series didn't get the acclaim it deserved overseas. Both titles received enormous community love, but Gothic has become increasingly difficult to run on modern systems. ReGoth was a proposed solution, but like many source ports, it was abandoned. In its place, OpenGothic appeared. Using its own open source multi-platform Tempest engine, this project ports and enhances the original Gothic and its sequel, so that people can finally see what they missed out on in the first place, without having to install a boatload of community patches. Number 6. Dxx Rebirth. In the late 90s, Parallax Software released the source code for their Descent games, 6 Degrees of Freedom shooters where you destroy robots in mining tunnels and such. Great fun unless they make you nauseous and confused. This led to L Descent, then D1 and 2X, and finally Dxx Rebirth by Christian Beckhauser, who worked under the laudable belief that Parallax had got it absolutely right the first time, and the gameplay didn't need any tweaks beyond bug fixing. Now you can enjoy this pair of landmark shooters with all the resolution and frame rate and 3D acceleration improvements you could ask for, while still having them feel remarkably true to the vision of the developer. Number 5. The Urquan Masters. Toys for Bob's Star Control 2 is a wonderful mix of top-down space shooter and strategy and adventure game, with fabulous writing that totally didn't inspire Mass Effect. Ancient aliens hell-bent on destroying you, planetary scanning and exploration, dialogue with bizarre voiced creatures with their own personalities. Yeah, it's one of those multi-genre masterpieces from the early 90s when people had more imagination and took risks. The Urquan Masters is a source port of a partially ported superior 3DO code, which features voice acting and improvements that the official PC releases lack. There's also an optional HD release, and the Mega Mod pushes the game even further. There hasn't really been anything close to Star Control 2 since, and it's rightfully seen by its fans as one of the greatest games ever made. Now, thanks to the hard work of the Urquan Masters team, you can experience that firsthand on any system you want, for free. Number 4. Exalt. I've already played Ultimus 7 on this channel, and it lived up to the hype. Lord British's masterpiece was the high point of the long-running RPG series, and despite being 30 now, it's still essential playing for fans of the genre. Exalt itself has been in development since the 90s, and is still getting updates as of this year. That's impressive longevity for a project, and displays the passion that fans have for this seminal work of computing genius. Why has it taken so long? Because Ultimus 7 itself is an incredibly complex game, and figuring out the intricacies is a lifetime's work for some of these dedicated developers. Exalt offers the usual frame rate and resolution improvements, but also sports a series of nifty operational enhancements that include a better interface with status bars, an options menu, difficulty levels, modding support, and additional keyboard shortcuts. It might not be enough to entice newer RPG fans, but it will certainly help smooth things out for returning veterans, or those who want to go back in time and know a classic when they see it. Number 3. Anything featuring Kyle Katarn. Kyle Katarn is a complete killing machine, but unfortunately due to being part of a Star Wars EU canon, the chance of his games getting a good remaster from Disney are about the same as the odds of scoring a direct torpedo hit through a small ventilation shaft. As of 2022, almost 20 years after the last game in the series, we finally have good ports for all of these first-person shooters, proving that when a large corporation fails, the fans will pick up the slack. I've talked about the Force engine in the past. It's the second attempt from the developer of Dark XL to make a modern engine to run Dark Forces on, and as it nears the 1.0 release, it's finally doing justice to what was far more than a simple Doom clone with a Star Wars skin, bringing it in line with modern sensibilities and showing just how incredible the first release in the series was. OpenJKDF2 tackles the sequel in Jedi Knight, and smooths out all the frame rate hitching and compatibility issues you'd expect from an early 3D accelerated Windows title. OpenJK is the elder statesman of the trio, having been around for years at this point and supporting Jedi Academy and even Jedi Outcast through the OpenJO build. It has its quirks, but there's no better way to enjoy these latter-day Katarn adventures on PC. The enormous modding community and genuine belief that elements of these games have never been bettered is proof positive that you should check out these fan restorations. You know, so you can suffer through labyrinthine levels, unfair mechanics, devious traps, and get good difficulty levels, like all FPS fans should. Number 2. Open XCOM. The designer of the XCOM reboot once famously exclaimed, "That's XCOM, baby," after their playthrough went south, and it sums up just how brutal this strategy series can be. The original UFO defense is much more difficult and complex than those games. A base-building overworld where you have to prevent an alien invasion as the leader of a titular XCOM task force that transforms into a terrifying isometric combat mode when your units are on mission. You have limited ammo, hit points, and visibility, and one false move, and everybody dies. Open XCOM makes things a bit more friendly, with functioning scroll wheel, tooltips for the complex interface, and the usual bug fixes and graphical improvements. But it's an open source clone of the original, so don't expect much beyond that in terms of handholding. You will die, and it will kill you viciously and mercilessly and incredibly unfairly should you make a mistake. The goals of the team were to keep the gameplay exactly as it should be, but to allow for modability and tweaking should the player want to indulge in that, while supporting all kinds of systems for modern gamers to appreciate it on. Sometimes a game is so good that it speaks for itself. Even decades later, UFO Defense is being played and streamed and critically considered as the best squad-based strategy game ever created. Number 1. OpenMW. I left this off my previous list because I hadn't played it recently, and there's a good reason for that. There are a series of games that are a clear and present danger to someone like me. I know if I hit that install button I'll lose hundreds of hours of my life and have no time to play anything else on the channel. Nowhere is this more apparent than in OpenMW, an open source engine replacement for the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. Much like the previously mentioned Gothic, Morrowind was a breakthrough release for open-world RPG titles, featuring a handcrafted island instead of the procedurally generated continents of the previous two in the series. To many, this game represents the pinnacle of both the Elder Scrolls and Bethesda Softworks as a developer. OpenMW is an engine replacement for the old NetImmerse engine that Morrowind runs on, and has been in development for almost 15 years now. And as it stands is a rock-solid replacement that supports just about everything, even mods for the original game. Now, Morrowind itself has a lot of community love over the years, so it's entirely possible to still get a stable performance out of the original engine with enough tinkering and patching, but what OpenMW offers, aside from performance improvements and better effects, is cross-platform future-proofing. Should the day come when an OS update just stops NetImmerse in its tracks altogether. But that's not all. There are potential future uses for this new engine's compatibility too, with talented developers managing to get it to load Fallout 3 and New Vegas assets and levels, as well as bits of later Elder Scrolls games like Oblivion and Skyrim. Obviously these are in the experimental stage, but this project could extend even further than its original intended purpose, and provide a better quality of life for fans of those games. Now, back to avoiding Roller Coaster Tycoon. It looks so tempting. I should really get round to playing it one day. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?